This is planet Earth. Its age stretches back into the mists of time, allowing the unseen hand of evolution to deliver us the complexity of over 8 million species of animal. And all of them are completely fucked. The jungle. Beginning its journey as vertical columns of wood, this is where photocopying paper is born. Unfortunately, orangutans also used to live here, and now they're completely fucked. The oceans. Often migrating thousands of miles, it's here that plastic finally builds its home, before ending up in the stomach of marine life, which gets completely fucked. A deciduous forest in the Northern Hemisphere. Here, amidst the thrum of the dawn chorus, it is the early bird that catches the worm. But either way, thanks to global warming, both the worm and the bird are completely fucked. This is fucked, that's fucked. Well, all of this is completely depressing. I tried to make you love this place with my wonderful documentaries, but instead you completely fucked it. Now, all that remains is for me to get my affairs in order and leave this godforsaken planet.
We're joined today on Extinction Radio with Paul Beckwith, climatologist from University of Ottawa, and Shackleton the Black Cat. Say hello, Shackleton.
Say hello. Yes, Shackleton, when we got a cat, it was either going to be Dora, if it was a female, Dora the Explorer, male, so of course Shackleton. I mean, he's just, cats, you don't generally name them until after a while, right? You have to think of a name once you get them.
Yes.
And anyway, Shackleton went out, but he's a bit restless right now, so I think he's hungry, so I just let him go.
Wonderful. Well, good to see Shackleton this morning. So, Paul, a lot has been going on in the Arctic, and you've been posting some incredible videos lately. And the latest ones you've been posting have to do with methane outgassing in basically these little islands off of Siberia and up by Russia. Can't recall the names of them. But it's somewhere over in the Kara Sea, and also the jet stream and how the jet stream is being affected incredibly by a warming Arctic. So I want to just dive into these two areas and see if we can kind of make sense of them. So would you like to give us your run-up as to what is going on with the methane and the hotspots and the jet stream and the whole business?
So the island that we're talking about here is, this is Novaya Zemlya, and we have the Barents Sea is here on this side of it, and then the Kara Sea is up here. So what we've had in the last, within the last week is we've had lots of outgassing of methane from that region. That region is clear of sea ice. In fact, it's a region where it's a region that's losing ice in the Arctic more quickly than a lot of other regions. The whole Arctic ice is thinning, as we know, but often it's just open ocean in this area. That island has quite a history because a lot of the Russian nuclear submarines, when they were taken out of service, they were just sunk off that island.
Oh my
intact.
God, were they really? They just sunk a bunch of nuclear submarines up in the
Yeah,
Arctic? Did they really do
yeah.
that?
They sealed them. They say they sealed them, and then they just sunk them all around the island. So and
Okay.
ships also. So there's all kinds of nuclear reactors in vessels that are on the seafloor around that island. Also on that island, it's where they detonated Tsar Bomba. Tsar Bomba was the largest hydrogen bomb that was ever detonated. So
They
it was,
detonated a hydrogen bomb in the Arctic Ocean?
well, they did it right on the island. It was about during the Cold War. It was I think it was about 50 megatons or something. It was the largest H bomb. Like they couldn't bring it up in a plane and drop it. It was like it filled a room. It was massive, and
Forgive me for being shocked. I mean, I know that
yeah,
we're, I just didn't
yeah,
know that had happened.
yeah, there were some physicists who were worried at the time that it might ignite the atmosphere and take out the Earth. Right, because it was so massive. It was so much
I'm
bigger than,
speechless sometimes.
yeah, it was so much bigger than any other detonation. It was bigger than anything the U.S. Ever fired off during the testing. And it's there's a great Wikipedia site on just Tsar, like Tzar Bomba, Bomba. It's a great name for it, right? It's a very appropriate name. So there's a lot of history, but right now in this region for the last number of years has been open water, even during the middle of the winter. And as a result of that, it changes the nature of the jet streams. The jet streams, we know that the Arctic is warming, so the jet streams are becoming wavier and stuck in place, and we're getting increases in the frequency, severity, and duration of extreme weather events. But depending on the particular regions of where the ice is going the fastest, it changes the pattern of heat distribution, which feeds back and changes the pattern of jet streams. So we've had basically warm ocean, cold continent sort of idea. So the lack of ice in this region, the Barents Sea and the Kara Sea, is responsible for these brutally cold winters over northern Asia that we've been seeing. The lack of ice in this region here near the Bering Strait. So this is the Bering Sea. This is the Chukchi Sea. The lack of ice in that region is being correlated directly to these very cold winters we've had, where the jet stream comes down low over North America and causes brutally cold winters. So the distribution of ice is very important. Now, I'm going to go into a lot more details of that in the video series that I'm working on right now.
Okay, that's great. And I'd like to talk about this lack of sea ice in the Bering Sea and the Chukchi Sea too, and see how that's affecting everything and what are the effects of that going to be, because that's really starting to set in now.
Yeah, so what we've had in this region here over the Bering Sea is we've had very, very warm Pacific Ocean water going up. And you probably remember the hot blob with the ridiculously resilient ridge. So a strong ridge here.
Is the hot blob still there, or is the hot blob gone now?
No, it's not there right now. Nowhere near as intense as it was before. What happened is when the large El Nino happened in 2015, 2016, then the heat was forming over the equator, right, in the Pacific, and the hot blob kind of faded off. And then as the El Nino tapered off to a La Nina, which is sort of like a weak La Nina now, then the area here started getting a bit warmer again. But there was a very good, Alex Smith with Extinction Radio did a recent show on marine heat waves.
EcoShock Radio.
EcoShock Radio EcoShock. He did a really good session on marine heat waves. You know, we're landlubbers, right? I mean, we don't think of the ocean all the time, and or very often, but it's 70% of the surface of the Earth. So these marine heat waves, which are then taking out coral reefs. I mean, we had tremendous coral reef die-off in Australia. Up to a third to a half of the coral died in the Great Barrier Reef just in the last few years in that big heat wave. So, yeah, I mean, we're it's pretty obvious. All signs are indicating that we're in great trouble here. Of course,
we certainly are, and I'm just starting to see this kind of penetrate into the mass consciousness a little. It's not like just in the climatologists and all these people. I think that it's been out there enough times, kind of like in these little 30-second sound bites. Every so often they'll see something. I think some people are starting to put it together. What's your opinion? Do you think so?
Yes, there definitely seems to be a slow, a painfully slow, I still say, shift in public awareness. I'm still kind of convinced that, that when we, like Arctic sea ice, when there's no Arctic sea ice at the end of a summer, after it's all gone after a melt season, and, that could be, it could be as early as this summer. I'd say it would happen by 2020, probably 2022, something like that.
So you think probably, so we're 2018, that would be 4 years from now. You think possibly in September, no more ice.
I mean, because then we'll reach a sort of a tipping point in human understanding of what's going on, I think, and human behavior, and hopefully, that triggers a sort of an awakening in the world of, hey, we have this crisis, right? But
I think it might be a case of too little, too latte. What do you think?
Yes. Well, it's I mean, it's we're a weird species, basically, right? We're a highly nonlinear species. Our behaviors are highly nonlinear, and it's just if our nonlinearity can goad us into strong action, maybe we can reduce the nonlinearity in the climate system. I mean, there's groups that are doing a lot of very interesting stuff. One of them is the Healthy Climate Alliance, and they're talking about reframing climate to climate restoration. The goal is like, how do we, the goal is very simple. We want to, the goal is to restore the climate system to that our grandkids had, basically, restore our climate system for our grandkids to that which our grandparents, to what we experienced when we were young, to what our grandparents experienced when they were young.
Got you. Right? So you're basically talking about, 320 parts per million of carbon dioxide. I mean, honestly,
intergenerational equality, basically.
Do you? Right? I mean, do you think?
Look, yes. I mean, basically, if you don't weigh the lives of people in the future at all as having any worth, then climate change is a problem, right?
Well, then I guess we've got no problems because we clearly don't care about the future generations. So done deal. Let's just go party, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just talking, let's go party. I've heard that before. People say, let's go party and not worry about anything, right? I don't know where I've heard that before, but so is it too late? I mean, I get that question asked a lot, and what do you need to really define the question a bit better, like too late for what? I mean, if there's a couple of people left and everybody else has been wiped off the earth by abrupt climate change or a meteor, it's not too late for them to try to survive, right? So too late is, it's not all or nothing. It's not like it's not too late and then it's too late. That type of thing.
The thing I don't like about too late is it's like black or white. It's polarized, and it's like, well, the hell with it. I mean, we can't do anything anyway, so let's not do anything.
Yes, so, and this is, I think, when I think the tipping point in human understanding of the problem will happen. What I mean is people that say, oh, climate change, if it does exist, it's a way out there problem, year 2100 problem. And then these people that will suddenly go to, so it's not a problem to, okay, now it's too late. We can't do anything. We're completely finished. Again, black and white polarization shifts. And this is pick up any book on cognitive behavior therapy, or talk to people about it, and it's a very powerful method to make people sort of ground people, get them, because people are it's get rid of this black and white thinking. There's lots of gray areas in between. It's not all or nothing, right? It's not black and white. There's stuff happens all the time in the world, but how we respond to it, how we think about it, that's what's important to how we feel about it, and so on. Right?
I absolutely agree.
It's a frame of mind sort of thing. So this is very important in climate change. So the idea of the Healthy Climate Alliance is saying, well, we don't know how we can do it yet, but we have to have a goal. So the idea is to have an RCP 0.0. Okay, so the IPCC has all of these scenarios, right? They have the worst, the business as usual is like RCP 8.5 or whatever. 8.5 watts per square meter of additional forcing. And this is like business as usual, temperature spiking. Their best scenario is RCP 2.6, which is basically stabilize, keep temperatures under 2.0. We might overshoot over 2 degrees and then come back. Or anyway, it's their best case scenario, and it involves bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, which was removing some carbon from the atmosphere. Right? This is the IPCC. So
it's a multi-pronged attach. So they're talking about carbon sequestration. They're probably talking about like some sort of misting in the Arctic to encourage the sea ice. They're probably talking about a variety of different things.
Yes. I mean, there's a lot of technologies that are on the table, and a lot of them, again, it's not all or nothing. It's not going to be one magic bullet or one magic technology. But the goal is to try to get the IPCC to have this new scenario, an RCP 0.0 scenario, right? Where basically, and there's a group. It's 300 by 2050. So the idea, to get back to 300, nominally 300 parts per million by 2050. Okay, and this sounds like a total pipe dream, right? Totally impossible. But the thing is if you don't have a goal, an objective, then you have nothing.
You won't get started, and you should not get started just because it's too discouraging, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we somehow missed our target and got down to 350 by 2050, nobody's going to be saying, well, you didn't make your 300, you guys are useless.
Well, at least they'd be doing something at this point. I don't believe any serious sequestration is being done on any level. I mean, maybe little experimental things, but nothing that's, going to take a massive amount of CO2 out of the atmosphere. And they're still working on the way to store that stuff.
Yes. I mean, the New York Times magazine that did the article about, I guess it was last summer, that kind of had a lot of impact, a lot of readership on, how screwed we are, basically, right? Do you remember this article, Wallace or somebody who did it? Anyway, they had an article very recently it was all about dirt. It was all about soils and how there's a huge potential to put carbon back into into soils. Like we need to change the way we do farming. No-till, but there's lots of different ways. I'm not talking just about biochar. There's lots of other methods to have soils capture huge amounts of carbon. But again, it's the oceans, I think, is the key. I mean, I've talked about ocean fertilization to pull huge amounts of carbon out of the atmosphere. I've talked about restoring marine life. And there's a really good book, and I'll mention it again. It's called Seascaping as opposed to landscaping. And the author is Joe Quirk. It's a name that you can't really forget. Joe Quirk is the author. And I picked it up. I thought, this is a joke, this book, because he's talking about having huge populations of people living on the ocean, right? On these modules that can be attached together. But the key thing is if you can stimulate phytoplankton growth in the ocean, and you get the zooplankton, they suck CO2 out of the water, out of the atmosphere, and it there's a proliferation of life up the food chain. And, you know, we've taken most of the life out of the ocean. We've lost 90% of the large fish in the oceans, for example, by overfishing. And now we're losing, you know, phytoplankton levels are dropping because of the acidification of the ocean.
Right. So when you talk about fertilizing the ocean and encouraging the phytoplankton to really take off and bloom and everything like that, if the ocean is too acidic, which it's getting to be very, very acidic, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is there a type of phytoplankton that can bloom in acidic waters?
Well, there's, if you get phytoplankton blooms, then that will remove a lot of the CO2 that's in that region to grow the phytoplankton, and that will restore the acidity of the ocean to more normal levels.
Oh, that's kind of cool. So there's kind of like a positive feedback you could introduce, and you get like a little pocket, and from that little pocket you could grow out like massive amounts more of phytoplankton in a healthier and healthier ocean, and that could spread out that way.
Yes, exactly. And there's two main types of phytoplankton. There's coccolithophores or the coccoliths, which are they're based on a calcium carbonate backbone, and that calcium carbonate will dissolve if it's too acidic. So those are the ones that are most at threat. There's also diatoms. Now diatoms their backbone is silicon dioxide, or basically glass. So they make these glass lattices, it's like sand. Sand is silicon dioxide. So they take the silica out of the water. They make the silicon dioxide backbones, and they're more resilient to ocean acidification because their backbones, the glass matrices, do not dissolve in the more acidic water. So they're more durable. So the mix of diatoms to coccoliths and foraminifers, which are also calcium carbonate based, the mix can change as the ocean gets more acidic. Also, the size of the organisms changes. We get to more of the archaea type organisms, the smaller organisms, more basic organisms. There's more of them when the ocean is more acidic as well.
I wanted to ask about jellyfish. I know we were supposed to be talking about the Arctic, but I want to talk about jellyfish because it's my opinion that jellyfish are going to rule the world in the future. I mean, I'm kind of joking about that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, jellyfish are taking off. I mean, they're sucking up things. They're like getting caught in like nuclear reactor intake valves, and they're crazy. They're like 2,000 pounds. Have you been following this thing about the jellyfish?
Yes, and the reason that jellyfish are very resilient to low oxygen levels in the ocean. So we're getting a lot of these dead zones in the ocean where the oxygen levels are less than a threshold that will support. So fish basically, they either suffocate in that region, but they generally swim out to a different region, try to find regions with more oxygen. So and if the whole water column is deoxygenated, then all of the benthic life that lives on the ocean floor, like the worms and the little crabs and things, they just die. Like it becomes totally barren. But jellyfish, they're their whole body, they have an enormous surface area, right? They're an enormous surface area. And each part of that surface can absorb oxygen. So they can live in very, very, very low oxygen level environments, whereas nothing else can. So they proliferate. Their natural predators go away. The things that eat them go away. And sorry, my jury-rigged system. I don't have my tripod with me, so.
Oh, it's very exciting talking about the jellyfish. Things tend to happen.
So
but
the
you know, I
jellyfish.
mean, I want to talk about the surface area because that's fascinating, right? You think, oh, how could a jellyfish have so much surface area? But you think of all those little protrusions and those long things and all of that. I mean, you know how the coast of, like, for example, Rhode Island itself, that state in the United States, is very, very small, but it's got so many of these little inlets and inlets. The coastline of Rhode Island is incredibly long for the same reason that, you know, the jellyfish have a huge surface area. It's all those little protuberances.
Yes, and this brings us to fractals, right? fractal geometry, right? Like, how do you measure the length of a coastline? Right? It depends on how big your ruler is, like what your division is. If you're measuring it on a broad scale, you'll get a certain number. Now, if you use a ruler with smaller divisions, you get a larger number. And if you keep going down to higher and higher resolution measuring, then the number keeps going up and up and up. So and it doesn't converge to a fixed number, right? So how do you measure the length of a coastline, right? So these so a lot of animals, they have like fractal type geometries for their surfaces, because if the surface is, it's not just part of their body, it has a purpose, and it could be oxygen. In the case of the jellyfish, it's oxygen exchange across that surface. Okay, so yeah, they're very, very durable. So at least, as long as we can still grow peanuts, we can have a lot of peanut butter and jelly, right?
I don't think jellyfish are very tasty. I wouldn't ever really want to eat
actually, people are eating jellyfish, right? But
heck, hang it up. Human hunger is solved. We can just all eat jellyfish.
Yeah, well, jellyfish and crickets, right?
That's too sad.
You can. I went to the local supermarket. You can get cricket powder now.
No, I did not.
Crickets, crickets grow extremely quickly, right? And they eat. Their life cycle is very fast, and they grow very fast, and it's basically almost pure protein.
So we could make cricket bread and have jellyfish sandwich, right?
Yeah, yes, exactly. So crickets are a guy called me up and he said, I want to talk to you, interview for this newspaper about cricket farms. And I said, what? You're joking, right? Like, I thought it was like a crank call or something. I called him back. We had a good chat for, about an hour or something. And people are this is becoming a real thing. There's actually a company in Quebec that is producing crickets, and local supermarkets in Canada are actually starting to stock cricket powder.
I actually think I saw something about that. There's some show called Dirty Jobs or something like that, and he goes around and do you ever see that show? And and I think there was one at a cricket farm, and they were making stuff like that, which is quite astounding. But I guess, from a logical standpoint, it makes good sense. It's protein.
Yes, it's high protein, and they grow extremely fast, and you can do it indoors. You can have a little cricket production facility in your basement, and then they're gassed, I think, to kill them. They get to full size, and you don't let them die of old age. They're gassed or something.
Well, they have nice lives, cricket lives.
Yeah, and then they're then you grind them up into this powder, and you don't need to, but people tend to
I think the legs get into your teeth and things like that. It's not nice.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So I don't know. I mean, we're getting to Soylent Greenish sort of stuff, right?
Yeah, we are really. Oh, it's happening before our eyes. Okay, I'll tell you what. Let's get out of crickets and jellyfish. Let's go back to the Arctic, because I want to talk about methane hotspots. If we could talk about the methane hotspots, and when those methane emissions start to really come up, like they're coming up a lot in the Kara Sea, in the Laptev Sea, all up there in the East Siberian Arctic Shelf, up by the Lena River and all of that, a huge amount of deposits, biologic deposits and all outgassing whenever it gets hot, and it's just sort of wafting. It has and then it wafts away, and it seems to have cycles. When those hot spots are coming up like that and they're starting to outgas, do they ever seal up? Like the next winter, do they seal up, or do they continue to emit?
Well, it depends a bit on the origins. If like there's a lot of organic matter that's in the sediments, and when that warms up, when it's frozen, it's not attacked by bacteria. And the bacteria that break down organic matter, if there's oxygen available, they produce a lot of CO2, right? That's aerobic decomposition. And if there's a lack of oxygen, it's anaerobic decomposition, and they produce CH4. So these sediments on the seafloor, if it's the organic matter decomposing, then that process takes a while, and there's a lot of these methanophiles, different bacteria, which actually can decompose them, break down the methane as if it's coming out slowly. The problem is if there's a burst of methane, if there's a large release, then the bacteria are overwhelmed and swamped and they can't decompose it. And if the water is shallow, 50 meters, if it's on the continental shelf, which it is in the Kara Sea and the Barents Sea, then the water is fairly shallow. It's about 50 meters or so deep, and the methane can just come up through the water column and go into the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. And plus, the water can only hold so much. It can only decompose so much. I mean, it gets saturated.
Yes, it gets saturated, and then it's mostly the methane. And then, of course, there's the methane clathrates, which are it's a frozen water lattice surrounding the methane molecule. When the ice melts, then there's an expansion of about 160 times, and from the methane that's in the lattice and the hydrate to the gas, and then that can build. If that's under the ground, then that gas pressure can build up, and eventually you get these. Pingos. You're seeing the pingos or the Siberian craters that we're seeing, because those craters are on this area here, in the Yamal Peninsula.
Mm-hmm.
This is where all these methane. That's right up here. This is where all those methane craters are appearing in the ground, like pockmarking. It's like a World War I battlefield.
Yeah, or an extreme case of bad acne.
Yes, exactly. So these things also extend onto the continental shelf, right? And this is the area where the ocean, where the sea ice no longer forms really. So year round, the water temperature is above zero or above minus 1.8 degrees, which is when seawater freezes. And this is a risk, So as we lose more and more sea ice, right? I mean, it takes a lot of energy to melt ice, but the temperature stays at freezing point. But then when the ice is gone, that water, because of the heat capacity of water versus ice, if you take energy to melt 1 kilogram of ice and then apply that energy to that kilogram of water, it'll go to 80 degrees.
That's right. Very, very quickly.
Right.
The old analogy, you've got a nice glass of iced tea. It's filled with ice cubes. It's always going to be at the same temperature. You take it outside on a nice day. You're drinking it always the same. You turn around, the ice is melted and it's warm,
Yes.
So,
yes.
That's what's going to happen to our Arctic Ocean now.
Yes. So, so the article I'm talking about in a series of videos, and I've released the first one. I filmed 2 others. I'll release another one later on today, and then maybe another one tonight as well. And basically, it's a Climate Variability and Predictability Center, CLIVAR. They had a conference with about 100 different climatologists, meteorologists, all different people to look at the linkages between the warm Arctic, the Arctic temperature amplification, and the the effects on mid-latitude weather patterns. I mean, people following us, they know that this has been going on for, we've been talking about this for years and years and years. And the mainstream science is, the articles, all the details about the connections are coming out. I mean, we're exactly right. I mean, we've been talking about this for years.
That's right. I mean, I've always been very willing to be proven wrong. I've never adhered to whatever I've said, and you've never adhered to whatever you say. You just say, this is what I'm seeing. This is the science. This is physical reality. Take a look yourself,
Yes, it's using, I mean, there's not enough. I mean, scientists are very, very specialized, in their individual areas. And I've been saying this for years. I mean, there's way too many specialists and not enough people who are joining all the dots and putting the together.
Hence people like Paul Beckwith who make the great synthesis. So very happy for your work. Something that struck me when you were talking, and you kind of glossed over it so quickly, but I just want to kind of visualize it for everybody. You said methane, and it's true, methane expands by about 160 times or so when it goes from the frozen state directly into the gaseous state. So let's say this is a thing that's 1, right? And this is a thing that's 160. So it basically goes from that big to that big molecule per molecule. Is that right?
Yeah, so
It's a huge amount of
you've got the
pressure.
methane molecule at the center of ice, basically. So water molecules that are frozen, and when that so the methane is contained within this area, and when the water molecules, when the ice melts, right, then the methane can expand 160 times in volume. So if it's under the sediments in the YAML or on the continental shelf, as it expands, you know, the pressure will build up to tremendous pressures. And what we're seeing then is a plug of earth eventually gives way and is just blown out. And you can see the very well-defined, sharp, smooth walls of these craters and high methane concentration at the bottom, and the material spreads out, and some of them ignite and go. I think that may happen. I mean, where's the spark? It could just be a couple. It could, if there's movement, rocks hitting each other can generate sparks.
Well, the reindeer herders up in Siberia, up in the Yamal Peninsula, have seen these things when they've gone off at night. You know, they're up there herding their reindeer, they're nomads, exactly. And they see these things in the sky, they go, you know, and they can see them when they blow up. I mean, it's real, it's happening.
So, yes, exactly. And so I guess the question is, you know, is the ignition happening? Like, does the thing start to give way? The huge pressure starts pushing the material up, rocks hit each other, cause a spark, and then cause the thing to ignite? Or does it ignite and then that's the trigger that pushes it up? I mean, we don't know for sure, but also these things can happen on the sea floor. And off New Zealand, there's a shelf off New Zealand where these craters are, there's evidence that the craters have gone off that are 100 miles in diameter.
Yes, there is. There are ancient methane craters off the coast of New Zealand, and I kind of diagrammed that out in one of my presentations as well. And they're stunning in their size, and they're stunning in their number. Do you have any idea how old those methane craters are in New Zealand? Has anyone ever been able to date them?
It's difficult to get people are working on that, of course. It's very crucial information. I mean, we think that they're related to some of these periods. We've gone through, you know, people say we're in the 6th great extinction right now, right? Is it Elizabeth Kohler or, you know, there's a book called The 6th Great Extinction. Mm-hmm. There's a book called When Life Nearly Died, and it's about the Permian extinction. You know, the biggest one where we lost 90% of all life on the planet, essentially. You know, even larger was, I mean, a lot of species went extinct and stuff 252 million years ago. I mean, that separates the Precambrian to the Cambrian sort of period. So these craters are definitely very old. They're generally millions of years old, and we're trying to pinpoint whether, you know, something happened, something severe, you know, some severe thing happened. There's also connections, right? If you think about it, you know, if we get a meteor or comet impact on the planet, right, that generates all of these shock waves, and these shock waves could trigger volcanoes, could trigger earthquakes on other parts of the planet, could trigger underwater landslides with methane release. Like, we know the Storegga slide off Norway was this massive landslide, and we know there was a large release of methane during that event. So the point is what happened? Like, did the methane start going up, causing the landslide, which then caused more methane to be released? Or was there some other thing? Did the landslide just trigger? Did it just go off because it was put a prime to happen? Same thing off the Cayman Islands, right? We're worried about a landslide off the Cayman Islands that could cause massive tsunamis, or, you know, globally, we're talking about waves 100 foot high, 200 feet high. You know, do they happen and then trigger other events? So we're still working on, you know, the causal sort of chain of events of these things, and also the probabilities, the likelihoods of them happening, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, they do happen. I mean, we are hit by meteors, asteroids, comet shards, things like that. I mean, there is evidence that at the end of the last ice age, some like 12,800 years ago or something like that, there were comet shards that hit across the Canadian
Yes,
glaciers, and
yes, there's a
there was a
theory.
huge water,
Yeah,
you know, what is it, melt pulse 1A or something like that, where the sea levels
yes,
just went up astronomically after this event. Do you know anything about that?
yes. The sea levels were rising. Um, the sea levels were rising. It was something. It's about. It would be about 5 meters, 5 meters, maybe a bit more in less than 100 years. So we're talking about basically 5 centimeters or 2 inches per year of sea level rise.
Hmm.
Right, 2 inches per year, 5 centimeters times 100 years. That's 5 meters rise. I mean, if the if the doubling period of melt from Greenland and Antarctica is maintained, okay, and the doubling period for the last 20 years, it's about 3 doubling periods. It's about 7 years roughly. So 21 years would be, that's when the rate of melt doubles and then doubles again and then doubles again. So if it doubles every 7 years, so if those numbers sort of continue on sea level, we're talking about like conservatively, we would get about 7 meters of sea level rise by 2070. And I did a number of
Wow,
videos
yeah.
on it, right?
I've seen that video that you did, and it's pretty stunning, because when you think of it, you know, that's enough to swamp every single coastal city completely on Earth. I mean, that's done deal right there. And you're saying
Yeah,
that from your calculations, factoring in the exponentiation and the doubling periods, that you could see 7 meters of sea level rise by 2070. I mean,
right.
golly, we're almost at 2020. I mean, that's 50 years. So you're saying
Yeah.
7 meters in 50 years. Wow.
Yeah, and most of it, of course, would be in
It's
the
tough.
last. I mean, most of it would be, you'd basically have, if you got 7 meters by 2070, you'd have like most of it is in the last few years before 2070, right? That's the way.
Right. Because that's doubling, because that's the exponentiation right
Yeah,
there.
I mean, this is the whole thing about the human inability to understand the exponential function. The human is the way the mind, we can't grasp the exponential function. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot, the lily pad or the weeds in a pond, that idea, if you have weeds growing in a pond and they double, if they double every day, for example, and if the whole pond is covered in 30 days, and in 29 days only half the pond is covered, right? And in 28 days only a quarter of the pond is covered, but the whole thing's covered by day 30 because it's doubling, right? And I like the analogy. Okay, let's say we're in an office and I'm taking linear steps to a water cooler, okay? And the water cooler is on the other side of the room, and I take these linear steps to the water cooler, and I get there. Now, let's say I take exponential steps to the water cooler. If I take exponential steps, the same number of steps that I took to the water cooler, I'd go around the Earth more than twice, right? If the distance of my step is doubling each step, right? So we just don't understand loss of sea ice is exponential. Loss of snow cover in the spring is exponential. CO2 rise, methane rise, all those things in the atmosphere are exponential, right? So, it's the population, global population is exponential. I mean, this is the whole thing about the Club of Rome, right? Population was rising exponentially. Our use of resources, metals, things that we would mine, etc., for industry were rising only linearly. And eventually, we have a finite Earth, right? You eventually run out of, population growth continues to grow exponentially. We're heading, there's no other option but having a collapse in the whole system.
So if we're the weeds inside this pond, where are we in our weed development? If you were going to say the pond being 100% full is when we just completely choke out human civilization and choke out anything, where are we in our weed growing process?
Well, if you, you know, for our generation, you and I, right? I'm not making an estimate on how old you are. I know how old I am. But I mean, the global population, like when I was born, I mean, there are only, you know, there were less than half of the number of people on the planet than there are now, right? So the like, you know, we're struggling right now, being just above 1 degree Celsius warmer than, you know, it's funny because the baseline shifted. I mean, the baseline was always.
What is your baseline going to be? Is it going to be 1850? Is it going to be 1750? I mean, where do you really draw the line and say, for instance, there? And once you draw that line, don't keep redrawing it somewhere else and say, oh, we've only gone up this much.
Yeah, see, this is something for people to really pay attention to, because a lot of people that are now, a lot of studies that you see now, they use a baseline of 1980. They use the climatology, which is a 30-year average. So the most recent 30-year average that they use is 1980 to 2010. After 1990, climate has accelerated so much that if you're using that average, you're missing all of the change that happened from 1990 to 2000 and 2000 to 2010. So it looks like, hey, you know, everything's fine, right? If you think about it, if you keep shifting the baseline up to cover all this massive rapid change, and you're dishonestly hiding stuff. And I see large government documents and companies and stuff doing.
I think that's called cooking the books.
Yes, it is. So the realistic, the truth of the situation is 1750 is the number. When the IPCC started the baseline, it was 1750. They didn't define. They said pre-industrial. So take 1750 pre-industrial. And we warmed about 0.3 degrees to the 1880 to 1910 baseline. Okay, about 0.3 degrees. So you'll see that baseline often used now, that sort of the turn of the century, 1880 to 1910 or 1900, you know, as being the baseline. So you need to add 0.3 Celsius to that. Now, then they started using a 1950 to 1980 baseline. So add another 0.3 degrees to that.
It's dishonest climate reporting, in my opinion.
Yeah, so, you know, back when we had the powerful El Nino in 2016, there were entire months, like I think the month of February 2017 or something, the temperature was, you know, to pre-industrial, it was about 1.8 degrees or so. All right, that's the number. So when we talk about Paris being 2 with aspiration to 1.5, we're already ahead of that. Now, this was it's backed off a bit, right? Because that was a strong El Nino, but we're still, right now, you know, we're more like, you know, you see the number 1 or 1.1 now. I mean, it's at least 1.2 degrees above. It depends. There's variation from month to month. And also, you know, often the comparisons are made just, you know, this February to the February, you know, at the turn of the century, or, right? It's done on a monthly basis. And of course, the warming in the Northern Hemisphere is much, much more powerful in winters than it is in summers, for example, right? So you have to take, I mean, we're in like we've destabilized the system at the present temperatures and at the present global population. So how can we possibly, you know, we're 7.6 billion people. How can we possibly talk about realistically that, hey, everything's going to be fine at 9 billion, at 11 billion? I mean, we're expecting to reach those numbers. You know, I don't know what the present number is for 2050, but, you know, by 2100, we're talking about 11 billion people according to projections. But those projections never account for things like climate change. They ignore it's just they just take a straight line, or they do a projection.
And let's talk about disease and viruses and epidemics and things like that. I mean, if you've got like the population of planet Earth just heading off into, you know, the stratosphere, literally almost. I mean, and then you've got food impacts, as we know we're going to have food impacts from a warming planet. And then you have extreme sea level rise that's going to hit us by 2070 to the tune of, 7 meters, which is kind of like scary, right? Paul, do you have any hope? Honest to God, please, just tell me, do you think that there is a way out of this mess?
Well, I think that whether there is or not, we have to try.
Agreed. Okay. Agreed. Okay, there's two things. There's like, where are we ultimately going to head, and is there a way out? And where is our personal efforts and declination and our response to it? Because I think our response is most important right now.
Yes. I think most people, will go from, most people right now, there's a lot to be, there's not a lot to make us hopeful, especially with US politics, for example. Right? I mean, we seem to be, and with fake information and with,
I honestly don't know what you're talking about. Did you say there's fake news?
Fake news? Yeah, I mean, with the ability of data mining, so, people's data, everything about their lives is going into these huge databases, and then the programming to find trends and patterns in people's behaviors are allowing algorithms, computer algorithms, and small companies, small numbers of people to know basically everything about people and how they're going to react when they do things. And they're gaming, of course, election systems and voting systems and like there's so many things that are going on that are conspiring against us taking any strong action on climate change. It looks like Putin, the Russians want the sea ice to go. I think that's pretty clear.
I think they do.
They want
They want to drill. They want to get all that oil.
They want to exploit
and they want to use their ships and everything to go through it. And
right.
Who knows? Maybe think some more nuclear submarines while we're in the process, just because.
Yeah. Now, but what they're missing the whole point that the whole climate system on Earth becomes completely destabilized when that situation happens, and they've missed that all along.
Do you think they're really missing it? Don't you think they know?
Well,
I mean, they must know. You and I know, right?
Okay,
you and I know.
So,
Obviously, they know. I mean,
know.
We're just stating the obvious.
But I guess they think that the outcome will be different from what we think, right?
Mm.
Like they think that that the changes will be able to be handled, I guess, by northern countries. Like, they'll be able to grow more crops in Russia. The growing season will be extended.
I see. So they see global warming as an economic opportunity for them.
Well, I think they see it as a huge opportunity. Yes, as a huge opportunity for them. Whereas we would argue,
might be.
And it seems that the science is showing that it's not going to be a huge economic. It's not going to be a beneficial thing for human society. It's going to completely. It's going to make. We're going to get areas near the equator that are completely uninhabitable. I mean, what about the record temperatures in wasn't it just in Pakistan?
Pakistan, they just had the hottest temperatures in April on Earth. It got up to 128 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
And that was in April, and that was due to a hot dome that was stuck over the North Indian Ocean and then lodged itself squarely into Pakistan just north of India and just like sat there and roasted them.
Right.
In
and
April,
the problem when a hot dome originates over the ocean, it's completely different from a hot dome originating over land. If the hot dome is originating over land, it's a relatively dry hot dome, and people can tolerate, hot temperatures when there's little moisture. The problem with a hot dome over the ocean is you get this huge evaporation and you're reaching the dew point, and the air is saturated with water, and when that goes over land, basically people just keel over. You can't work outside for more than half a day before your body core temperature starts overheating, because you're not able to sweat, because you're at that 35 degrees Celsius, 100% humidity is the point where your body can no longer sweat.
Yeah,
right?
pretty darn scary.
So you can't work outside. Well, you need some sort of suit. You need a water cooled suit. So there's a huge market for that. So set up a company, a startup.
Well, we could do those things that they did in Dune. Did you ever read the book Dune when you were growing up? Right?
Yeah.
Frank Herbert.
Go
the spill
underground.
suits, the Fremen.
Yes.
Maybe
yes,
we're going to, have to evolve things like that, right?
Yes, that's right. So it's a huge problem.
Well, I don't really think we've solved anything here today, Paul, but it's been an incredibly invigorating conversation. I know that we've kind of had a little bit of fun with it, because you really have to. I mean, how can you look at this information in the face and not laugh a little bit? But in any case, it's been a great pleasure to interview with you today here on Extinction Radio. I hope to have you back again very soon. And
thank you.
do you have anything that you'd like to say to our watchers here today? Before
well, I should give a little plug.
Yeah, give a plug.
Most people are aware of my website, paulbeckwith.net, and I have a plethora of videos on all different topics. A lot of people aren't aware there's a word search on the right margin of my website. So if you're looking for any particular topic, you can just go down and find the word. And with the word searches, the larger the word is, the more it's discussed in different videos, etc. So have a look at that. And
paulbeckwith.net.
Yes, and the present series of videos is all about the what the mainstream scientists are recognizing as far as Arctic temperature amplification, and how it's changing how it's leading to extreme weather events at mid latitudes. But I should caution that this whole report, there was a line in it saying, for the sake of brevity, we're not going to talk about Greenland. Okay, so they're not going to talk about sea level rise. It's not mentioned at all in the report, and they're also not going to talk about the permafrost thaw and sediment. So they're not talking about methane at all.
I get so frustrated because everything has to be considered. We need to frickin' put this into a giant supercomputer that can just take it all together, 3-dimensional graphics, seeing the whole thing, the whole projections and everything.
Yes,
and it's difficult for humans to take it all on board and understand all the interacting positive feedbacks, some of the negative feedbacks, and just all the consequences, and putting it all together. And that's why we need people like you, Paul Beckwith, to educate us. You have been one of my teachers. You may or may not know that, but I started watching you before I did the Methane Monster for a couple of years, and I learned everything from you and from Jennifer Francis. And so keep up the good work. You're an incredible educator. Human consciousness transformation is the most important thing that we can do right now.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I think I'm going to do a series of videos soon just talking about systems, right? How do you get because we don't think well in terms of systems, components and things. And I think my chess has helped a lot in that. The chess, when you play chess, you've got all the different components, and you're trying to figure out how they move and connect together. And basically it's like a system. So I'll use a lot of analogies, and I'll do a number of videos soon on systems thinking, how you can think more in systems.
Right, systems, holding many ideas together in our heads all together and synthesizing it all at once automatically.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Jennifer. We'll talk soon.
Absolutely, it's been a great pleasure. Be well.
ni le bien qu'on m'a fait, ni le mal, tout ça m'est bien égal. Non, de rien, non, je ne regrette rien. C'est payé. Avec mes souvenirs, je allume le feu, mes chagrins, mes plaisirs. Je ne plus me smoller, balayer les amours avec leur trémolo, balayer pour toujours. Je repars à zéro. Ni le bien qu'on m'a fait, ni le mal, tout ça m'est bien égal. Non, de rien, non, je ne regrette rien, car ma vie, car mes joies, aujourd'hui, ça commence avec toi. Mm-hmm.